Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Kep. I am the co-founder and chief content officer at From Day One, which is our forum on corporate values. Welcome to today's webinar, when we'll be focusing on what motivates workers, especially in these times of transition from all the things we've gone through in the last 3 years. But before we get started, for today's attendees, which would be you, we have some complimentary VIP tickets available for one of our monthly virtual conferences coming up on Wednesday, April 5th. That conference is titled Getting Creative in Total Rewards, How Employers Can Set Themselves Apart. As organizations increasingly prioritize flexibility in their benefits and their rewards programs, what are some of the best ways for them to be competitive with their peers? Innovation seems to be the name of the game in 2023, given the challenge of distinguishing benefits and compensation offerings in a crowded marketplace. So speakers in the April virtual will consider questions like, what aspects of the employee experience should be increasingly considered key aspects of total rewards, including career growth, well-being, and job flexibility? I'm putting a link in the chat now to access complimentary VIP tickets to that virtual conference, including access to the whole day's activities. The regular price of our conference tickets is $149, so don't miss out on this opportunity. I hope we'll see you there. Now, today we'll be exploring the topic, money talks to workers now, but what motivates them even more? With inflation persisting, especially for essentials like food and fuel, a lot of companies are boosting salaries to stay competitive. Yet employers would benefit from exploring other strong predictors of engagement and retention, most notably intrinsic motivation. Today's speakers will explore why this factor is so closely connected to job performance. We'll also consider how companies can better understand and better leverage it. Today's webinar is presented with support from Attuned. I'll tell you a bit about them. Drawing on decades of academic research into the psychology behind intrinsic motivation, Attuned's AI-powered software makes the hidden values that drive people visible. This allows managers to understand their teams on a whole new level, offering insights and actions to enhance communication, boost engagement and productivity, and ultimately make work more meaningful. So a few quick logistical items before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and it'll be available on demand soon after the event. So you can look out for an email in about 24 hours with a link. That same email will have info on how you can get professional development credits for this session from both the Society of Human Resource Management and the HR Certification Institute. And you can look out for a written account of this conversation on our website at fromday1.co. Now, 45 minutes into the webinar, we'll have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions anytime they occur to you using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. We're joined by a remarkable panel of experts whose conversation will be moderated by Emily McCrary-Ruiz-Esparza. Emily's a freelance journalist and From Day One contributing editor who covers the future of work, HR, recruiting, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and women's experiences in the workplace. Her work has appeared in the Washington Post, Fast Company, and Quartz at Work, among many others. Emily, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Steve, and I'm very happy to be with you all today. Of course, money is important, compensation matters, but it's not everything as we're seeing lately. Many professionals are willing to leave their workplaces or leave their employers if remote work is no longer an option, if their flexibility is being removed by company policy. Further, employers are increasingly interested in retaining employees as a cost-saving measure and also to preserve institutional knowledge that's really valuable in making sure a company is prepared for the future and remains competitive. So this will be a really valuable conversation. And before we get to our questions, I'd like to begin by having our panelists introduce themselves, tell us who you are, your title, and very briefly what you do at your company. We'll begin with Isabel at Newmont.
Hi, thank you, Emily, and hi, everybody. My name is Isabel Montes. I am the HR Vice President for South America and Mexico. We are the biggest gold miners in the world, and I lead the HR function for 4 of our operating sites, one in Argentina, one in Suriname, Peru, and Mexico. I am Colombian, and I'm going to give you a lot of description because it's going to be important as part of the conversation. I moved to the US 23 years ago. I am a purpose-driven leader, and that's what I'm very keen about. And I am the mother of 2 little boys, one that is 6 and another one that is 4, that keep me going. Thank you, Emily.
Well, thanks, Isabel. Ellen?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. I'm the Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Ascension. I have specific responsibility over talent and talent strategy. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. Casey?
Yeah, I'm Casey. I'm one of the founders of Attuned, which was described a moment ago. So intrinsic motivation software that helps people be understood at scale. So organizations know no matter how large you get, you can understand everybody's individual, unique intrinsic motivations and build psychological safety. I'm the CEO and do whatever CEOs do.
Thank you, Casey. And finally, Joe.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jo Malia-Barsetti. I am VP for Global Talent Management and Development at Penguin Random House, which is one of the largest global trade book publishers. And I'm also responsible for the global talent strategy as well as learning and OD in the US.
Thanks, Joe. Welcome to all of you. Let's begin. As a reminder, we will have a Q&A at about 1:15. So be thinking of your questions. Anytime you feel so led, feel free to put them in the chat at the bottom of your screen and we'll get to as many as we can. All right, let's go. So in fields like healthcare, Ellen, where you work, and even in publishing, speaking as an avid reader myself, motivation might be more easily identified. The beauty of taking care of people, or the joy of reading, or the dissemination of great knowledge and great stories. It's easy to identify why someone might be motivated in their role in that kind of company. But, for example, lots of healthcare employees have become very burnt out as a result of all of the events since 2020. So when that kind of motivation, the natural motivation that comes from the type of work, is burned out, is gone, what keeps employees going? We'll begin with Ellen on this one, since healthcare is your field.
Yeah, thanks. And so we're really fortunate at Ascension to not only have what you just described in typical healthcare, but to have an incredibly strong mission, which is to serve the poor and vulnerable. And so, of course, our clinicians live out that work every day. But even someone like me who has an office role has a very clear line of sight into it. And so as we look at each of our decisions we make every day, it's really taking us back to that mission, why we're here, who we're here to serve. We can also see it in very tangible ways too. Our organization offers things like medical missions. And so it's really important that we open those things up to all of our associates so that we can see the mission and tie it back to that work of the poor and vulnerable. Those medical missions provide free medical care to the underserved. And I cannot tell you what a life-changing and reaffirming thing it is to go and spend a day doing that in one of our communities. So our mission is why I joined Ascension, and it's why I stay every day. So if I was to kind of tie that up in a neat bow, it's really about culture and how you engage people to tie back to the bigger purpose of why I'm here. Everybody's heard the whole bricklayer, right? I'm laying bricks, or I'm building, a castle. So it really is tying that back.
Joe, what do you see in publishing? It's not historically known as a very high paying industry. It's not like healthcare, being a physician. What motivates folks in publishing beyond just books, which is enough to motivate me any day, truthfully?
And a lot of people. Yes, traditionally, I would say people would say, oh, well, I'm not in publishing for the money. They're certainly there for the passion. I think one of the red threads that runs through publishing is passion for the mission, for books, reading, and the power of the written word, and the influence it has on culture and conversation and the world. And people really believe in that. And from a motivational point of view, that's very strong and very powerful across our business, across our territories. And for us, it's around how do you really keep that creative element and that content core to our business, and you remove all the barriers to that so that people can be very focused on doing what they love, being able to work with the authors, being able to create great books and great content, and kind of deliver on what brings them to work every day. So I think it's very similar in a lot of ways to what Ellen is saying around the culture and community, and having that common reason why everyone joins publishing, regardless of whether you're in one of our editorial teams or whether you're in some of the corporate teams of finance or facilities or HR. Everyone's coming for the books in most cases.
So I guess what I want to get at there is, when those things are not enough, does that make sense? Even in a dream job, on your best day, it can be particularly rough. So being burnt out in healthcare and having to work long shifts, what beyond that? So the community, I'm getting a sense, is the fact that people are united around this mission. When the natural mission is gone, what can keep workers motivated? Is it simply a reminder of that? Is that the role that HR is playing? Or is it something else? Is it trying to reinforce that, basically?
Yeah, I know it's interesting that you say HR to remind people of the mission, but it's really about, is that part of your culture and what those leaders do? The people that you work with every day, the people that you report to, are they able to kind of help you ground yourself even on the worst day to the bigger picture of why you're here?
And just to build on that, I think it's also for Penguin Random House, at least, what I see a lot of, it's around being heard and being seen. So when, it's all good and well coming to work for the passion, but if you're burnt out, like you say, or you're really struggling, it doesn't really matter much. So it's really, how do we tune in our managers, our leaders, to where people are at, and how do we help them meet people where they are? How do we provide the right resources and employee programs, etc., to support them and have that adult-to-adult conversation and be real? It's not all fairy dust. It really is, there's a lot of work to be done, and at the same time, there's a lot of demand. So how do we make sure that we're supporting wellness and creating boundaries, etc., especially this post-pandemic world where a lot of our employees are working remotely, and that has a different creates a different dynamic when it comes to creating a line between home and work.
So motivation is, we can certainly look at trends and see how people are motivated by generation or by income level or even by location or parental status, all kinds of things. But really, motivation is a very individual experience. What motivates me will not necessarily motivate anyone else on this panel, or even necessarily anyone else on this call. So how can employers work on a enterprise level while also considering the individuality of motivation? Casey, this is very much your world, so I'd like for you to jump in on this one first.
Yeah, thank you. And it's really why we founded and kind of created the company. So I think what Ellen and Joe were just talking about, it's the people around you. It's your manager and your leadership. Are they able to see you and understand you? And it's not just, understand the life events and the stresses that you're going through, but can they understand what are your particular needs? Okay, Emily's unique, Casey's different, Isabel's different. Like, how can we understand these, each of us, and what kind of brings out these natural intrinsic motivations that we have. And I think the difficulty always has been it's, evolutionary biology, where we can see the world through our own eyes and what excites us. And this is the way most managers come to work is, okay, what got me here and what got me excited to go through all the difficulties, that's how I'm going to manage my team. And I think if you're getting 3 or 4 members in your team like that, there's a couple members that are very different. And then you just have these kind of Groundhog Day conversations with them because you're trying to manage in the way that works for you or has always worked for you, but it doesn't work for them. So I think this is where technology at scale can come out to it. So, okay, at the right moment when you're having these one-on-ones between a manager and a team member, and if you know the gaps where you see the world very differently, let's say somebody really needs high autonomy, just please don't tell me anything, just tell me what to do at the top, and then I'm just going to get on with it. But somebody else doesn't need autonomy. And let's say that manager doesn't need autonomy and they're dealing with somebody high autonomy, they're going to just be like oil and water type of situation. So I think it's the understanding that this is a problem. And I think we're all here together that is an issue, but we need, I think, more technology to help with creating that empathy and those human relationships and those trusts at scale. And that's what we need to figure out from here.
Isabel, when we spoke before, and even in your introduction, you address your personal motivations. You mentioned your family and how your identity affects what you do. I know that when you joined Newmont, you had to go through this process yourself and figure out your motivation for joining the company. And I loved what you shared with me before. If I would love for you to share that now.
Sure. Yes, thank you, Emily. Before working for Newmont, I worked for Starbucks for 20 years. And deciding to leave Starbucks was extremely hard because it's a company that was very deep in my heart. But when Newmont approached me, it really, the story that the company told me about the journey that they are in and what Newmont is trying to achieve in the mining company, it resonated enormously with my purpose-driven life that I want to experience every day. So really the opportunity to make an impact in mining and really the opportunity to go in a bigger scale and implement new ways of doing people for a business that has not been known yet as very progressive on that area was extremely excited. So that kind of check on the box of one of my main needs, right? And then also that desire and need for connection. Newmont is a company that is very global, that it has a lot of people that, like me, were not born in the US, English is a second language, that were studying someplace else. I'm an engineer, I graduated in Colombia, and I have a lot of peers that had kind of similar story. So that was also super exciting to be in a place where the fact that I have an accent was not like a big deal. So that also attracted me. And lastly, the flexibility. Like I mentioned, I have 2 little kids, and that autonomy and being able to manage my agenda and be able to find harmony as much as possible in my day-to-day was extremely important. So I really had a great experience interviewing and getting to know different players and asking about these different aspects of what does it mean to be working in Newmont and if it will make sense for me. And the answer was definitely. And it has been a year, and the potential and the amount of things that we are doing to impact the life of about 10,000 people in the Latin American region is just beautiful.
Ellen, you mentioned earlier your motivation for getting in and just the mission of the company. Was there anything, do you have a background in healthcare specifically, or was this your first foray into the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually kind of grew up in healthcare, if you will. It was one of my first jobs, and I worked for a not-for-profit organization that was sold to a for-profit organization, and that was over the course of about 14 years. And then I left healthcare and went into the insurance business. And really missed the mission component of what healthcare offered. What you mentioned earlier about that's just intrinsic and what we do every day. And then was fortunate enough to find Ascension, who really has a really strong mission, both in America and internationally, and that really led me to take that role. And it's exciting to be back in a job where I feel like the work I do matters every day.
So something that is popular to talk about now, probably because Gen Z is coming into the workforce at a really interesting time in the way we work, that they kind of graduated into work during the pandemic and during lockdowns where people were separated. And so I believe it was Washington Post or Wall Street Journal published a piece this week or late last about how the ability to come into the office at least some little bit, maybe a hybrid work schedule, even full time, is appealing to a lot of the really early career folks because they haven't gotten that. They haven't had the experience of working in an office. And motivations by age demographic are changing right now. They're shifting. We have a lot of people coming out of retirement for myriad reasons, but that's becoming quite popular to do right now. So I'm wondering what you guys are seeing in the differences in motivation by age demographic and how you're addressing that and providing, meeting the needs of those folks. Joe, I know Penguin Random House employs a really wide age demographic of folks. So I'd love to know how you're thinking about it there.
Yes, yeah, we do. We've certainly got a growing group of Gen Zs coming through, and we've got employees, long tenured employees who have been at the company 50 years. Penguin Random House, like a lot of publishing, is not it has a long tenure. People stay at the company, which I hope is a good sign. But you're absolutely right in terms of they need motivating differently. They're looking for different things coming in. And what we're seeing with our more entry level and Gen Zs coming through is they want to have a voice. They want to have a seat at the table. They want to feel connected to the community. They want to feel that they belong. They also want more clearer understanding of what their career and their trajectory looks like and what development looks like. They're looking for managers who are much more tuned in to them and their needs and their individual needs. Coaching seems to be working much more effectively with this group and empowering them. And so that's been really important in terms of when we're thinking about performance management and or what we call our personal development conversations, and building in the processes to make them very flexible, make them very individualized, to make them very development focused, and also a two-way conversation. So it's not the manager telling the employee what they've done well and what they haven't done well and just signing that off, but it's actually creating and fostering a two-way conversation between folks and also teams, and how we get them collaborating more. And post-pandemic, now that we're in this environment where for Penguin Random House US, we're very distributed. We've got a very full flex model, if you like, where we've got some people 100% in the office, and we've got some people are hybrid, and others that have been hired and never stepped foot in New York or in the office. And that's also allowed us to create full flexibility for the full range of demographics that we have at different life stages. And to your point, I think we have seen actually quite a lot of, in the US, depending on where we are globally, we've seen with the Gen Zs a lot of desire to work remotely. At the same time, a lot of excitement when coming into the office to get that office experience and to be really close. And then in Europe, etc., it's been on the flip side, where actually the more entry levels have really appreciated more office time. And at the other end of that, with the different generations, I think being able to have autonomy, being able to feel respected for what they're doing, having sabbaticals after a certain amount of tenure and being able to take that time off and be appreciated for being part of the longer term community at Penguin Random House and valued in that way is also really important. And that flexibility, again, if particularly because we're a very female organization, over 70% of our population is female. So when it comes to, and that's made a big difference when it's come to parents and being able to create that flexibility. So I think there is a difference. And to Casey's point earlier with that manager and employee relationship, and I think that's where it's really important, because in terms of helping managers and leaders align with the different motivations of the different generations within their teams.
Mm-hmm. You were the second person to recently mention sabbatical. So I hope those are catching on. I think that's a wonderful practice. More companies should allow those. Casey, looking at motivation across generations, because you guys, your customers, your clients are doing this. Can you talk about this from a higher level, maybe what you're seeing across businesses and how motivation by age may differ?
Yeah, of course. So we actually have access to a lot of metadata. So like tens and tens of thousands of intrinsic motivation reports, not all of it, but a lot of it tied to age or generation. And to take the opposite side of kind of the usual conversation, there's no statistical difference between intrinsic motivations of each generation. So somebody from a boomer generation or Gen Z, if you take random people, the likelihood that they come out with the same top motivators and the same things that don't motivate them is just as high across generations. So I think what you see is different behaviors, which is different than motivation. So, okay, we want to go to the office, like I'm coming out of university or I'm getting my first job. I want to build relationships. I want to build my network. I want some excitement, versus maybe different life stages where you have a family, you have kids, or you're taking care of somebody. And okay, remote work works better for me, or hybrid work works better for me. So I think those preferences in working style or flexibility really can come out to what is your maybe kind of personal situation on that, particularly around families and around care. Also, you know, whether you're an introvert or extrovert and how much energy does it take to interact with people, I'll play a dynamic on that. But generally, I think it can be easy for us to say, okay, this generation wants to be managed in this way, or this is what they need, but it really, really comes down to each individual. And I think we can get in trouble and we can assume incorrectly. And then what'll happen is we'll treat people incorrectly or treat generations incorrectly and mismanage them and ultimately burn them out and they'll walk out the door.
Yeah, the individuality of motivation is, of course, important. Isabel, you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I love it, Casey. I had the opportunity to listen to a podcast one of these days, and there was a scientist talking about human behavior, right? And he basically said that there are three things: is connectedness, mastery, and autonomy. And it makes a lot of sense with what you are saying, because it's like it doesn't matter at the end, the moment that you are in your life, or your background, or the color of your skin, or your sexual preference. At the end, we are all humans, right? So it's about like really understanding what is that ticks the box for that individual. And I'm like super interested to learn more about how technology at a scale can help, because I think that's the biggest challenge, right? How do you are in 10,000 conversations, understanding those particularities of each individual and what really makes sense for them?
Exactly. And I think that's very hard to train, right? Even your capable managers might not ask the right questions. They might even not have the right questions or be able to understand. And even if they're asking the questions, they're getting back not a shared vocabulary. So they might get an employee to say back, okay, this is what motivates him, but the interpretation of that in the mind of the manager is very different. So I think you were referencing Daniel Pink there, and in terms of the mastery and everything like that. So the more we can understand this and the interconnectivity with behaviors and really kind of the constraints of our human brain as well, and how technology can help and where it's right to help in what moments will help create the organizations of the future where we can deliver this more personalized understanding.
We've been talking about motivation in terms of, we've heard some of you say managers having those conversations and making sure managers understand what motivates their direct reports. Is it possible to flip that? And can direct reports serve to motivate their managers and those above them? Is that a thing? Or should we really be more concerned with managers and training them to look out for those who report to them? What do you guys think? Isabel?
I think it's about the culture that you create in the company, right? Of like helping people to understand that it's a two-way relationship. So it's not only the manager's responsibility to stay connected and understand what are those needs, but also the individual needs to be open and be looking for those opportunities to also be vulnerable and express what's going on in their lives. And that's created through culture. And for me, that's kind of the key, right? And the secret sauce that can put all this together. So it's people trying to get the best out of each other, regardless of their position in the hierarchy.
I think that was something I certainly had to learn early in my career. Is I learned to ask what my manager was responsible for, what they would be measured on, what they report to their boss about, because that way, when they made a request of me that I didn't understand, I had a better indication of why they were asking me to do this. That also helped me to be more proactive, and I hope make their job easier. We could ask for their reviews of my work later, but I certainly hope that was beneficial, and that just helped me understand where they were coming from, especially if I thought a request was out of left field. Casey, what do you think about this question?
I think it's a fantastic question, and I think you're awesome. Like, if there's more team members that come in and ask what their manager or their leaders need, and so they can frame it well from themselves, like that's a great entry question. But yeah, like there's so much pressure on managers. I think the ask that we put on managers is really, really difficult. Leaders, okay, they need to create the mission, they need to create the story, they need to create the the passion, and we can kind of visibly see, are they doing a good job or not? But okay, the manager is stuck in the middle. They've got to connect this to the individual employees, and just what Isabel was saying is like, if they can create a two-way conversation, if there can be transparency where some of that pressure comes off the manager, and you could be, managed or inspired by a team member, it's great. So I think this is where that, vulnerability comes in as a manager. Sometimes it's a little bit scary, but okay, this is what motivates me. This is what's going on in my life. Here's what's not very pretty about my life, type of situation like that. And, it can open the door for compassion. So there's certainly been times where, I'm not at my best as a manager, and I'll try to be open at the top. And, people know my intrinsic motivation. So maybe they'll, try to say something in a way that they know motivates me, or, just show that empathy that, okay, this is what's going on for you. They can do it this way. And of course, that creates that reciprocity. So I want to do it, even more for them in the future.
Yeah, building that personal rapport and wanting to be on this person's team more than simply in a sense of hierarchy, right? Wanting to be on their team, metaphorically, I suppose. Joe, did you want to jump in on this one? So you unmute.
Yeah, very briefly, I guess. It's as Isabella was saying, it really comes back to that culture piece of the team culture. It's like, what's the culture you're creating, the psychological safety, how do you remove some of that hierarchy as a manager and empower your team? So there's a sense of we're in it together. And I think with some of our creative teams, our editorial teams, and the imprints is we are in it together. They're creative teams. They work best when they're hearing all of the voices, regardless of level. And that hierarchy is removed, and it's a challenge or something to learn for the managers, and to Casey's point, letting go and being okay with not being completely in control and being and removing the ego a little bit, but actually being able to, but allowing them to be part of it is motivating then for both both parties, because then you're moving forward. There's an understanding of that context piece is there. I understand why my role exists. I understand what my part is in achieving these goals and this end mission. I'm part of that, rather than I'm just a cog in a wheel, and my job is just to produce. And so that's where I've seen most success on my team, and I see it within the creative teams as well.
I want to remind our audience that in about 10 minutes, we'll take audience questions. So if you have any for our panelists, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can in the time we have remaining. Many employers at the moment, and actually for the last several years, have been really working hard to diversify their workforces in terms of representation, specifically people from marginalized communities, or sometimes if they have a predominantly female workforce, they're trying to bring in more male representation. It's just trying to be more inclusive in building a more diverse workforce. But for those employers, it can be difficult to understand what it's like to be one of the first onlys in your organization, perhaps the first woman of color, the first neurodivergent person, who that's a necessary spot to fill, but it can be difficult for that individual. How can employers think about the unique motivational needs of these workers? Isabel, I know Newmont is predominantly male. And I think you guys are trying to change that a little bit.
Yes, yes, it's a big challenge, and it boils down, I think, to the same, right? Of how can we make sure that we understand as leaders what that individual is experiencing, and for example, being the first woman in a maintenance work shop. What does it mean? Does it mean that there is a restroom for that lady to go, or not necessarily? Does it mean that there are hygiene products available? Well, no, not yet. So really, I mean, like asking those questions and really getting deep on the experience, on the day-to-day, from the beginning of the day to the end of that shift, and what is that individual is facing, and how systematically we can help to remove those barriers, so symbols of exclusion, like we call them here, to be able to open the path for new, in this case, females that are coming, and also helping the leaders to get to what Casey was saying, right? That sense of understanding the experience of the other person, so there is more compassion, there is more empathy, and beyond the systematic things that we can do, that leader is also available to support. And what it has really worked for us is when you connect emotionally that leader with the change and what we are trying to do. So when you ask the leader, what are your thoughts if this first female in the maintenance shop was your daughter? And what will you like that manager to be offering to that individual that in this case is your daughter? Then the leader really starts thinking, okay, well, I will like this and this and that. Okay, well, go and do that because that's somebody else's daughter. So really also trying to connect people to what is personal for them and how they can be those advocates and drivers of the change when you have the first of anything.
It's very much about, as someone mentioned earlier, just the idea of being seen. You're not just a person hired to fill a quota. We want to make you feel like you belong here. We've thought about the fact that we need a women's restroom on this floor right now, or we need a mother's room, even if we're not yet required by law to do that. Those are just really important things.
And it's so interesting. So to give you an example, a very specific example, we have been like very keen on opening lactation rooms in the sites for the new mothers. And the leaders, senior leaders, were extremely supportive, right? And we opened them, we did the inauguration, balloons, pictures, and the mothers were not happy. And then when we started asking why, it's because the sites are so remote that yes, you can store the milk, but you can take it to the cities where the kids are at. So we really start engineering how can we systematically create a system leveraging our supply chain to bring the food, the milk back to their towns so their families can pick up the milk and the kids, the children, the babies will really be able to benefit from it. But it wasn't until that we sit down and spend time and had focus groups and really collectively try to solve for the problem is that when we were able to do it. And it was not that the leaders didn't want to, but in a community where most of them are males and had never thought about the right temperature to freeze milk, it's extremely difficult to find the solution. So it's really about like being super alert of those pockets of opportunities and go deep for it and solve it at a big scale.
That is an excellent contribution to employee well-being right there. Ellen, you were going to jump in on this one.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that's being shared, and Casey said something earlier, you know, people are people, and as you look at what's motivating them, I think all people are kind of looking for three things, and it relates to the conversation we're having right now. You know, equity, people want to be treated fairly. They want to be appreciated. They want to do work that matters, and then they want to know that their leader or even their peers are recognizing them for that. And then belongingness. They want to be part of something bigger. It's what we talked about earlier around the mission or culture, or, you know, if books motivate you, you know, you want to be part of that bigger picture. And then they want to have that right relationship with their coworkers. And one of the things I think Ascension has done well over the last few years, and it especially shown in the pandemic, is really create a framework. And it's not a program, it's called Abide. And we've specifically said it's not a program, it's a framework, it's a lens in which you look through everything. And it's what I think we were just talking about around policies, like how do you look at appreciation, belongingness, inclusion, diversity, equity, and that's what Abide stands for. And how do you look at that, take those words, understand what they mean, and then deliver on something that allows for your employees to feel those things in real, tangible ways. And so you know, obviously I could go on, but I won't. And it's just exciting to hear all of these comments and see how they all kind of tie together, no matter what industry we're in.
Very true. Very true. Okay. We don't have a lot of time before Q&A. Something I do want to discuss is whether motivation is something that can be measured. First thing that comes to mind is the problem of measuring something on a very individual level. But of course, HR often has to work on an enterprise level, or at least, you know, on their site. So they're working at scale. Should employers be trying to measure motivation? If so, how? What are you measuring? Are you asking someone how, you know, to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how motivated they are? Is it like an engagement survey? Or any of you doing anything like this?
I'll just jump in here just to kind of piggyback off what I just shared, because like a strong system of communication, I think is really key to any sort of measurement. And so we used, you know, what we call daily rounding and then quarterly check-ins. And the check-ins become important. And I think it was spoken about earlier in understanding what motivates their associates in creating two-way dialogue. So it's not just I'm telling you top down, like how you're doing. It's really that back and forth conversation, the sharing and the listening that results in helping associates and leaders foster that sense of appreciation and belongingness that I spoke about. And so when we think about the Abide framework that I shared, we've taken that a step further and put questions in our engagement survey that correlate back to that. And we're hoping that those results are going to help us to know where we need to improve.
Casey, I'd love to hear your answer on this question.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what we do. We measure motivation so we can understand what is the individual intrinsic motivators for that person. And then through pulse surveys, whatever time frame the organization wants, every 2 weeks, every month, every three months, check in very specifically, are that individual unique motivators for that person being met. But I think the key point is being raised by Ellen just right now is you can get the data, but what's the purpose of the data? So you can have the data for it, but it really is to start a conversation. And kind of one of the gaps that we feel as technology is, okay, we can give the data. Here's this individual's motivators. Here is how well they are being motivated on those specific kind of spectrum. But what is the manager or the organization doing to improve it? And usually that's where we as technology kind of drop off, because that has to be a conversation. That kind of feedback loop has to be closed. And this is one of the difficulties of engagement survey, is that loop is not being closed. Okay, the data is collected, it's probably discussed, there's probably decisions being made, but the people who delivered it and took the time to answer the survey, they get burned out because they don't feel anything changing in their life. So I think that conversation and making sure change is felt and updated is critical.
Yes, that's certainly important. Yeah, especially if you're asking someone to answer questions with frequency, wanting to know that you're not wasting my time in doing this, that my opinion and my experience is being considered in decision making. Okay, let's jump to Q&A because we have some really excellent questions I'd like to address. The first one is this. Sometimes people don't know themselves what motivates them besides short-term needs. Certainly understand that. Are there any ways to help them do that soul searching? I like the term soul searching here. How can you encourage employees to think about really what motivates them beyond? I assume some short-term needs could simply be the flexibility around the school year, right? And needing specific schedules there. It's going to be recurring, but maybe you don't need that all the time. That's my guess. If anyone has any other short-term need ideas. What are ways to encourage workforce to do the soul searching of what motivates them? Isabel?
Yeah, I can go. I think that it's the experience of the manager in terms of just life in general that could help. I mean, I'm assuming here that most of the time the manager has like more years of work experience, but really having those like intimate moments with the right questions that can trigger those insights. I wish there was a perfect like pill that we could take like when we're around 20 to figure it out, but that is not the case. And it's just through intentional conversations and the desire from the leader to really understand, and the curiosity of that individual to learn and understand themselves.
Casey, I'd like to know your thoughts on this one as well.
Of course, other than to talk up my own book, again, like certainly, there is a way to look at your intrinsic motivation, but I think it's very much as Isabel's kind of alluded to, is we're all on a journey. And I think traditionally where it takes us years and years, as we get into our 40s and 50s and 60s, we're still figuring out. And many of us, in our 30s or 40s, we have a reassessment. Okay, the path we took, the choices we make, those weren't really what get me excited now that I put 10, 15, 20 years into my career and my work. Like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life type of situation? So I think if we can short circuit this and do this earlier and kind of check in, like the deeper motivations don't change very frequently, but they do change. So, as we have big life experiences, as our kind of big emotional impacts, they shift what becomes important to us. And we don't really have the vocabulary to be able to talk about it, and like certainly to do it with ourselves. So, we need, whether it's a person or a coach to help facilitate it, or technology to say, okay, here's where your motivations are a little bit different. But then it comes to the conversation like, okay, why is it different? And what does this mean? How do I apply that? So it's complex, and it's a lot of communication. Ultimately, you have to be very sophisticated in communication to get the very results.
I'm not trying to pick on you. You just do happen to be good at this. That's why you're coming to you on these. It reminds me of folks who maybe go through a career switch, right? I think a lot of them may experience that moment of reevaluating what their next, what the remaining 20 years of their career might look like, or 30 years of their career, which is, this is what motivated me to pursue this industry or this type of role. That's not really working for me anymore, and I need to reconsider it. I think that's a really valuable self-examination to do. Joe, would you like to jump in on this?
Yeah, I just to build on what both Casey and Isabel were saying, and I completely agree, and to give around asking the right questions and also helping employees think it through for themselves through tools, and to kind of give a practical example. And one of the things that our performance management conversation, or our personal development conversation, is part of a growth toolkit, which is a group of tools and conversation tools to encourage conversation throughout the year. And one of those tools is a personal one, which is around motivation, like what motivates me, what gets me out of bed in the morning, what's my motivators versus my demotivators, and looking over. And it's a tool that uses over your career history, where are the heights and the lows of that, and what were the drivers. And those tools have been really helpful, particularly actually for the more junior levels. But when there's a moment where people are questioning, actually, where am I going? And we've used it in coaching before, and built it into leadership training as well, and helping leaders ask these questions as part of their personal development conversations. The leaders and the managers should be able to have a good sense of what motivates and gives that person energy versus not, by being around them every day. So I don't know if that helps.
Sorry about that. I couldn't find my mute button. Yes, Joe, that's helpful. And it is also a very good segue to our next question, which is this: how does motivation interplay with what people are good at? In other words, an employer might value an employee for what's important, but bores them. We think we've all been here, being good at something we don't particularly enjoy. How can a manager match the skill to the job satisfaction? Ellen, I'm going to come to you on this one first.
Yeah, sure. So that's a tough one. I'm looking at it on the screen too. So employer might value an employee for the work that's important, but it bores them. How can a manager match the skill to job satisfaction? We might go back to kind of what we talked about just a minute ago, and understanding the purpose. So understanding the purpose of why the work's important, or understanding the bigger picture and the mission. And so having a leader and an employee have that dialogue about what is that bigger picture, kind of, Emily, what you said, why you asked your leader, like, what do you need this for? What are you getting recognized for? And so, as humans, a lot of times, maybe it's not something that's exciting for us, but if we know that it's exciting for the people that we work with, or it contributes to a bigger picture, or it's helping our boss in some way, and as long as that's reciprocated, perhaps that might be a good place to start.
This question, maybe you would like to jump in on this one as well, Ellen, since you brought this up, the idea of recognition. The question is, should companies go to great lengths to show workers the positive impact of their work? I think everyone here would probably answer that question as a yes. Then I'll alter it then to say, can you give an example of a way that an employer can recognize workers for their contributions in a way that's particularly motivating? And I guess I would ask you to consider that not everyone likes to be talked about publicly. Not everyone likes for their contributions to be discussed or recognized publicly.
Yeah, so I agree. And I think that would be the first piece, is really, as a leader, knowing, and we talked about this earlier, knowing and what each knowing the personalization of each associate, and really having an understanding of what is going to motivate them. So, if, do they want that shout out in that meeting? Do they want something on what we call a kudo board, that's an intranet site where it's out there? Would they rather have a small bonus, some sort of gift card or something in regards to that? And also matching kind of the contribution to what the reward is. So, if somebody does something really large and it's a full-scale project that lasted a really long time, or something like that, perhaps the reward is larger than if really they just help somebody out in one day and there's just a shout out during a meeting.
Has anyone else worked on specific recognition programs or practices that you'd be willing to share? Something that's worked, Isabel?
From my previous experience, usually when you are in retail, for example, you don't have weekends, the entire weekend off. And that is a huge, big way of recognizing somebody to have an entire weekend off, or to be able to choose the chief during certain month because they have a birthday of somebody in their families, and something that is important. So really going back to that autonomy and helping people to get to in jobs that are not that is, I imagine is the same for healthcare, but those type of flexible solutions are a good way to recognize great work.
Yeah, it's certainly tailored to the culture of the company and the environment and the way everyone naturally works together by nature of the work, I suppose. We don't have a whole lot of time left. Something that I would like to ask you guys, it's not in the Q&A, but I would like to know, what have you guys found is not particularly motivating that perhaps at one point you thought would work? Maybe a policy that you implemented, a means of recognition that wasn't effective. And I ask this not to end on a downer, but I think it helps to know what sort of thought processes that you guys have had and ways that you've evaluated motivation and deciding what doesn't work. And again, what hasn't worked in one organization could work in another. So it's not a failure on your part. It's an idea for viewers to take away. I do want everyone to answer this. It could be a small or big piece. We'll start with Joe, and then I'm coming to everybody else.
I haven't got a specific example coming to mind right now. I might in a moment. But what did come to mind is when the company or the leader comes across as tone deaf and are not listening, or someone is, that recognition and appreciation is so important, and not feeling seen or feeling recognized or appreciated can have huge effects. And that's probably where we see the most challenges within teams, is when someone is feeling kind of invisible, or their contributions is not being recognized, or there's not a consistency in recognition. There's the usual suspects versus everybody else.
Yes, that's very helpful. You could, if for those who have yet to answer, something that is personally demotivating for you would also be, I'd like to hear that as well. Casey, you are next.
Wow, putting on the spot, personally demotivating, I'll have to think about that. But going to the question is like, demotivating is, I've spent so many hours like in my earlier management kind of Casey version of thinking about incentives for my team, or teams, like how do we get the project finished on time and under deadline, or how do we achieve this, KPI or goal? And they're usually quite short-term incentives. And I've used to remember, thinking through weekends and not getting to sleep because how can I craft the perfect one? Because I know that last one didn't work for everybody, so this one's going to be even better. And I spent hours and hours and time, and I think it was all wasted in the end. Like, it didn't really change performance very much, and probably it demotivated particular members on that side. So I think creating general systems where people feel recognition, but then just going back to understanding and taking all that energy. And what I did as I guess I matured was just try to understand people individually. About what is their personal situation, what would they like. So demotivating for me, probably public recognition, like that. Probably too much public recognition would demotivate me. Would probably be one. So to answer directly.
Isabel. Oh, I think you're on mute. There you
Yeah,
go.
sorry, fighting here with my with my button. Personally, I think lack of recognition. I opposite to Casey. Like, it doesn't have to be super public, but like if I have like working really hard, I want that that thank you. For me, it's important to feel recognized. And the other thing is probably, and I have seen it in several cases where, let's say the individual is saying, you know, I have this situation at my house, and for me, it's very hard to start a meeting at 7 in the morning because I have to take kids home and everything. And then the manager sending an email, like putting a meeting at 7 in the morning, like that lack of respect or signaling that, I mean, I'm listening and I care. Sometimes it happens, it will happen, but when it's like all the time and it's frequent, I think that motivate the person because they were open, they were vulnerable, but it didn't go anywhere.
I'm so sorry to cut everybody off. We're at the top of the hour. So that's all the time we have. I really appreciate everybody who contributed today. It's been a lovely conversation. And I'm going to turn it back over to Steve from Day One.
Thanks, Emily. It sure has been great. And obviously we all have more to say, or you had more to say. So thank you to all of you, all of our speakers for being here and sharing research and insights and a lot of positive advice for employers and managers. So thanks again to Attuned for your support and to all of you who participated today. Before you sign off, I'm going to drop the link again to some complimentary VIP tickets for one of our virtual conferences coming up on Wednesday, April 5th. It's called Getting Creative in Total Rewards, How Employers Can Set Themselves Apart. We'll be discussing how organizations can offer competitive, innovative, and flexible benefits and rewards. We hope to see you there. So on behalf of all of my colleagues at From Day One, thanks for participating and stay well. Drive safely in all that snow. Bye for now.